The classic symptoms of a poltergeist haunting are chairs moving by themselves, unexplained banging, implements disappearing, then suddenly turning up days later in the same place or somewhere different, or water dripping from the ceiling. Poltergeist is German for noisy ghost, and the phenomena is usually credited to mischievous spirits, and cases have been cited almost since the beginning of recorded history. Although many hauntings have been accredited to ghosts, there are poltergeist incidents that have been centred around a living agent, such as a child or teenager. The following are 6 true poltergeist stories that might make you shiver next time there is an unexplainable noise or incident in your home. Number 6. The Thornton Heath Poltergeist. In the 1970s in Thornton Heath, England, a family was tormented by a poltergeist that began one August night when they were woken in the middle of the night by their blaring bedside radio that somehow turned itself on. This was the beginning of a series of events that lasted almost 4 years. A lampshade was repeatedly knocked to the floor by an unseen force, and in Christmas 1972, an ornament was hurled across the room, smashing into the husband's forehead. As the husband was recovering from that ordeal, the Christmas tree started to violently shake. The following year the activity worsened when footsteps walked across the bedroom floors when there was no one there, and one night their son awoke to find a man in an old-fashioned dress staring threateningly at him. One evening, when the family was entertaining, there was a loud knocking at the front door, where the door was then flung open and all the house lights came on. They tried having the house exorcised, but it seemed to escalate things when objects flew through the air and there were loud noises. And then the family heard what sounded like a large piece of furniture crashing to the floor, and when they went to investigate, found nothing was disturbed. A meeting was consulted and told the family that the house was haunted by a farmer of the name Chatterton, who considered the family trespassers on his property. On further investigations, they found that a family called Chatterton had indeed lived in the house in the mid-18th century. It appears that the noises were now becoming apparitions, when an elderly grey-haired woman dressed in a pinafore, with her hair tied back in a bun, who was probably Chatterton's wife, would follow the wife up the stairs, and as the wife turned around only to see the elderly lady disappear into the shadows. The family even reported seeing the farmer appear on their television screens wearing a black jacket with wide pointed lapels, high-neck shirt and a black cravat. The family eventually moved out of the house, and strangely though, none of the subsequent residents complained of any unusual activity. Number 5. The Indianapolis Poltergeist. In 1962, 3 generations of women lived together at 2910 North Delaware Street, Indianapolis. The head of the house was Renata Beck, who shared the home with a mother and a teenage daughter. Apparently the 3 women didn't get along and would regularly fight. The family tensions were then escalated by a string of unusual activity that began the evening of March the 11th. The first thing the women noticed was a beer mug moving by itself, and later a large bang came from upstairs, and the women found that a crystal ornament had been thrown several feet from a shelf and smashed into pieces on the floor. The 3 of them left the house and spent the night in a hotel. When they returned the following afternoon, everything appeared quiet, but after about 30 minutes, the women heard sounds of breaking glass coming from the kitchen and found the glasses and crockery being smashed. A cup flew through the air and narrowly missed Beck's mother, Lena. The women called the police, and over the following couple of weeks, officers regularly visited the property to try to figure out what was causing all of the damage. A paranormal investigator was called in and was bruised by a glass that was thrown from down the hallway, and a series of bites and scratches appeared on the investigator. Strangely though, when Renata's mother Lena moved back to Germany, the paranormal activity suddenly ceased. Number 4. The Nollamara Poltergeist. Nollamara is a suburb about 8 kilometres north of Perth in Western Australia. and in the late 60s, unusual events terrorised a young family in their home. When Lee and Pat and their young child moved into one of the oldest houses in Nullamara, almost immediately strange things started to happen. They just started a new business and money was tight, so until they can get onto their feet, Lee advised his wife to go easy on the spending. No sooner had he said this when an envelope appeared in the letterbox containing $10. Nothing unusual about this, you would think, maybe a benevolent friend, until a few days later, when Pat was dusting the window frame, a $20 note fluttered down from the curtains. Again, you might think the previous owner had hidden the note above the curtain. Unusual thing to do, but that would have been the only rational explanation. However, one night when retiring to bed, they found 5 brand new $10 notes strewn on the bed. They did not feel good about this and felt uneasy. Something did not feel right, and they did not want to feel beholden to whatever or whoever was doing this, and placed the money in a cupboard. The next day when they inspected the cupboard, the money had disappeared. Slowly things started to escalate, and one day when Pat was on the outside toilet, the catch slowly lifted up by itself and the door suddenly opened. Another time as she went up to her bedroom, she found all of her clothes removed from the wardrobe and scattered on the floor. The entity then started to pester her husband Lee by taking his cigarettes and also pelted him with pellets whilst he was trying to read a newspaper. On complaining about these missing cigarettes, the next day a brand new packet had appeared on the kitchen table. Returning to the house one evening, they found a stick of incense burning on the windowsill, and at Christmas time, a decorative ball disappeared from the Christmas tree and was found hanging on a tree in the garden. The entity then started stealing food, and on one occasion, a missing pair had appeared on their car seat. Another time, Pat had left a piece of stewing steak on the plate and briefly left the room, and on returning, found the plate empty. In utter frustration, she screamed at the entity to return the meat, and a few minutes later, it reappeared on the plate. She then chopped the steak along with some vegetables and placed them into a pot on the stove. Then as she stood back, the pot was thrown violently on the floor and the vegetables were scattered everywhere. But strangely, the meat was still in the pot. On another harrowing occasion, a kettle of warm water was tipped over her 18-month-old son. Unfortunately, he was unhurt, and at the same moment, a plate on the kitchen table was smashed. One time, her son was chewing some meat when it was suddenly snatched from his hands and disappeared. After attempting to exorcise the entity, they finally decided to move out, and thankfully, the entity did not follow them. Number 3. The South Shields Poltergeist. Pontefract is a town near South Shields in the northeast of England, and in 2005, a young couple named Mark and Marianne and their 3-year-old son were terrorised by a poltergeist. The activity started in December, where chairs were stacked, chests of drawers were moved, and doors were slammed. One night in bed, Marianne felt her son's toy dog hit her on the back of the head, and as she sat up and turned on the lights, a second stuffed dog was thrown in her direction. As the couple were cowering under their sheets, they felt something trying to pull them away. Then all of a sudden, Mark yelled in pain and 13 scratches appeared on his back, though the scratches were gone the next morning. It was obvious the poltergeist was shown that it could cause direct physical harm to them. Its next terrifying act was to hang a rocking horse from the ceiling by its reins. Then it placed a large cuddly rabbit in a chair at the top of the stairs with a box cutter in its paws. The entity then left messages on the young boy's whiteboard and even sent text messages that couldn't be traced to any phone or computer. The threatening messages said, "You're dead." Family called in paranormal researchers Mike Hallowell and Darren Ritson. The experts determined that the activity was real and even wrote a book about it called The South Shields Poltergeist. In the book is a picture of a plastic bottle poised in an impossible position and a message on a magnetic drawing that said, "Just go now. Number 2. The Apoticarbal poltergeist. In 1965, an 11-year-old girl named Maria Jose Ferreira was subject to the most infamous poltergeist activity in the history of Brazil. It began in her house in the city of Apoticarbal, when bricks and stones began to materialize out of thin air and smash things. Maria's family called in a priest to do an exorcism. This only angered the spirit, and the onslaught got worse. The largest rock found was 3.7 kilograms, and some of the stones were magnetic. When the rocks eventually stopped appearing, furniture started being thrown around. Maria was then attacked physically, where she was slapped and bitten, and ended up with bruises. Needles suddenly appeared embedded in Maria's skin, and on one occasion, 55 had to be removed from her ankle. The poltergeist held cups over her face to suffocate her in the night. The problems even followed her to school, and at one point her clothes spontaneously caught on fire in the lunchroom. The attacks went on for a year before Maria went to see a medium. The psychic said that Maria was being attacked by an angry entity, and then it planned to haunt Maria for her entire life. That life was sadly short. Maria poisoned herself when she was 16, and when she had died, paranormal activity suddenly stopped. Number 1. Galway poltergeist. The following incident happened in Galway, Ireland, to the Fahey family in the early 90s, who started to experience strange paranormal events in their house. The first was a horrible smell that started to permeate throughout the house. Then after about a month, the smell slowly faded. Then one night, the parents were woken by a loud thump, and after going downstairs to inspect, found nothing. The next strange event was when their son and his girlfriend were awoken one night by a very bright pulsating white light in their bedroom, and both cowered in fear under the blankets. News of the strange events had gotten out, and one day they were visited by a stranger who said that about 30 years before the current houses had been built, there was an old farmhouse surrounded by open fields, and the man said he knew the people who had resided there, and they too had experienced strange happenings, such as their blankets being pulled off the bed, and would pray in terror. Meanwhile, in the current house, poltergeist activity started to escalate, such as bedroom doors being slammed shut and locked, the toilet flushing by itself, and in the lounge objects were being thrown around the room and a coffee table was upturned. The family immediately left the house in fear, but in all of the terror, the dog had been left in the backyard, and when one of them had returned to feed it, all of the lights in the house started to flash on and off. 2 days later, when they felt brave enough to re-enter the house, they found nothing but utter devastation. They did not stay and spend the evening in the neighbour's house. They then tried taping the noises, but the electronics went faulty. They then started to hear a baby cry, and when one of them went upstairs to inspect where it was coming from, a vase flew across the stairs and smashed. They called the priest to come out, where he gathered the family together to say mass, and as he started talking, a baby's crying got louder and louder. They were visited by Aideen Sheehan, a journalist from a Dublin newspaper, who was very sceptical about the events in the house. As they were talking in the kitchen, they heard loud crashes coming from the lounge, and on entering, found that pictures had flown off the walls, and a heavy TV had been pushed backwards, and a porcelain dog had somehow shattered. Aideen's skepticism had been put into question, as she had no explanation as to what could have caused it. They were visited by psychic Sandra Ramdahini, and on entering, she immediately felt the presence of a spirit who had not moved on, and felt the whole house needed healing, and had gotten all the family together around for a seance. The psychic had discovered that 100 years previously, a young monk and nun had murdered a newborn baby, because in those days they could not have faced the shame, and the spirit of the murdered baby had continued to haunt the house. The psychic was able to move the spirit on, and after that, the house was peaceful.